Welcome back to Communicology. Today is a weird day. I move into the ranks of only 5% of the country. What could that be? Before we jump into that, please take a moment, if you would, to subscribe and like and share this video. I would appreciate the help. Now, what do I mean when I say I jump into the 5% of the country? Well, today's my 100th episode, and it's kind of a neat thing to think about that I've made it to 100. And, as someone who works for a living, doing something 100 times isn't really that big of a deal. I can't tell you how many hundreds of classes I've had to teach, but 100 episodes of a podcast, who knows, where it's going to end, but I'm kind of happy I made it this far. And why 5%? Well, according to studies, of all the podcasts that get started, the vast majority of them flame out after 2 or 3 episodes. So it's kind of amazing to even make it to 50, but to get to 100, only 5, maybe even 6% of podcasts that get started make it to 100 episodes. So yeehaw. Maybe I'm tooting my own horn a little bit, but hey, for today, I'm going to allow it. So the question is what's the process? How do I make it to 100? You might be someone who's thinking about, I think it might be kind of fun doing a podcast. It might be a neat thing. I have some neat things to share. I want to talk about things. Well, how do I even get started? Well, to let you know, I wrestled with those same questions. I kind of wondered for a long time, I teach for a living. Why can't I just hop in front of a camera and do that too? Offer some things about communication and culture and technology and talk about those kind of things. Some cool geek stuff, nerd stuff, even throw in some theology and jump into this space and try tinkering with it. Why not try it? But I never did. I kept putting it off. And maybe that's where you are. And you keep putting it off too. Well, the more content creators I watched and listened to, and that people would ask them how to get started, they would just say, just start doing it. And it sounds simple. Just start doing it. And it technically is that simple. But for someone like me, I was thinking over and over, is this something I really want to do? Do I have all the equipment? Do I have everything right? And I want it to be just right, because I take teaching very seriously. So whenever I step in front of a classroom, there's only been a few times in my career where I stepped in front of the classroom not really knowing where I was going to go with that lesson that day. And it's a terrible feeling. I hate doing it, and I don't want to let down the students. So whenever I come in here, I want to make sure that I am going to be able to attend to this, not do those few episodes and flame out, not go 10 episodes and flame out, 20 and flame out. And then, of course, you start wrestling with the whole idea of, will there be enough episodes? Will there be enough stuff? Well, fortunately for me, the field of communication is insanely broad. And I'm what's known as a communication generalist. I teach all forms of communication. So there's all kinds of stuff out there. And there are all kinds of experiences and things that are happening in the world where people botch communication. Someone sends a tweet that's really terrible and they have to apologize for it and fix that mess. Or this relationship over here gets created, or this one over here gets ended. Or you have all of these different areas where communication comes into different areas of play, and there's always going to be stuff to talk about, especially when you start mixing culture and technology. That stuff's always evolving, changing, tweaking, so there's always stuff to talk about there. And frankly, no one in this space is mixing all those things and throwing in an underpinning of theology. So there's certainly a place for me, so why not give it a shot? And that's where I stopped. And again, maybe you're there. You've got all these great ideas, and that's where you stop. And you start thinking of all the different things you could dig into. So I want to talk today about some of those things that you can move into and you have to wrestle with and figure out, what do I want to talk about, how I want to do this, and what I need to consider. Because, by no means am I a professional. I've been doing this 100 episodes. That does not make me a professional by any means. And I've got some decent background in teaching, so maybe I could help you take that little extra bump over and get into doing this and trying it out. So first thing you want to think about is, of course, what do I want to talk about? So if I'm going to hop into start doing this, what do I want to do? And some people will talk about anything and everything. Like, what's on your mind today? I'll just talk about this. It could be politics. It could be weather. It could be religion. It could be outer space. It could be, in the ocean. Whatever and that's a very scattered way of doing it. And that shotgun approach will cover a lot of different things. The only problem is well, who's going to want to tune into that kind of thing? Just like I'm teaching my public speaking students, always be focused on your audience. So who's my audience? Who do I want to reach? And that's going to be a key thing as I talk through this. Thinking of your audience at all times. So again, what do I want to talk about? Well, what's your wheelhouse? What's your comfortable spot where you could talk about those kind of things for over and over and over? And again, this feels like I'm teaching a public speaking class, because when students are trying to come up with a speech topic, like, I don't know what to give a speech on. It's like, what do you like? What are you comfortable with? Because you think about your hobbies and things that you care about. I mean, you could talk about those things for hours. As you know, if you've been following me, I'm a drummer. I could talk about drumming for just stupid levels of hours and hours and hours, because I've been playing since 5th grade. I could talk forever about drums, all kinds of aspects of drums and everything like that. I could talk about that. I also like road cycling. I like shooting sports. I like all kinds of different things. Hunting, so I could talk about those things ad nauseum. But my real bread and butter, the things I really love talking about, communication and culture and how all that fits together in communication technologies. And I really love theology and having that standpoint from a grounding point to then spring forward. So those things are really interesting to me. I like that stuff. It just gets my nerd receptors standing on end and tingling, because I really enjoy that space. And there's a dearth of material to talk about. I mean, to last hundreds upon thousands of episodes. So that's fairly simple and straightforward. So the thing that you want to talk about, could you talk about it for more than a couple episodes? Are you going to flame out? Now, the other thing to consider after you think about your topic is also length of time. Because in this space, you could talk about shorts. Where you have like little, like YouTube shorts or like TikTok things or reels that are only like really short, like 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 2 minutes, something like that. And, is that something I want to do? Or do I want to do something more long form? And in this case, I chose kind of like an in-between. I mean, I do try to stick around 20, 21 minutes. It's a weird thing. It kind of comes from like my broadcast days, because like if you have a television show, a 30-minute television show, it's about 21 minutes long, because they have about 9 minutes of commercials every half hour of television. So yeah, I just stick around that thing, because that's long enough where people who are interested will hang out and listen. But it's not so long. It's like, I got to commit 2 hours to this. I mean, there's some podcasts out there that I listen to and pay attention to that can run 4 hours long. It's a group of people talking about subjects that I'm interested in, and they're interesting enough, and it is compelling enough for me to stick around and listen to. But that's not every day. I don't have time to do that every day. That's an occasional thing. But an hour a day, I could do that. Yeah, sure, easy. 20 minutes, that's definitely easy for me. Now, some people don't have an attention span, they'll go 20 minutes. And my content may not be for them, but it could also hook them and help them evolve into being a longer form content listener. So 20 minutes to me was just about right. And it allows me to take my huge topic of communication and chop it into nice little bite-sized bits, that I could talk about for hundreds of episodes. It'd be easy to do. So like before, when I mentioned drumming, I could take drumming and talk about how to play the drums. I could talk about what kind of drumsticks to buy. I could talk about the heads you use on the drums, what each drum does. I could do an episode on each drum, and that kind of thing. And you talk about world drumming, jazz drumming, concert drumming, all the different kinds of drum. I mean, you could break that up into so many different episodes of 20 minutes long. So the topic you're thinking of, well, what can you break that into? And you start wrestling with that, and lo and behold, it's not hard to go 20 minutes. And I know, thinking 20 minutes, boy, that's a long time. Until you start talking, and next thing you know, you're cruising right along. I mean, I've been talking for almost 10 minutes now, and it doesn't even seem like it. Feels like 2, but I've just been cruising right along. So, topic, important, hugely important, because it's one of those things that is there a place in this space for me? Do I think I have something to offer? Maybe some kind of niche angle to look at it, or some different perspective, that I can bring to this space. And then from there, how long do I want to talk for each episode? And is there enough material out there I could easily break it into those kind of chunks? And will I feel comfortable talking to that? So there you go. And then from there, you start looking at other things too. Like you have what's called evergreen content or current events content. Which do you want to do? I typically try to stay in the evergreen space. So anytime you watch one of my episodes, it's going to sound the same a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, because it's just communication concepts and theories, philosophy, things like that. I try not to brush too much into current events because, well, as soon as you do that current events thing, it's gone. In a week, it's a worthless episode. Maybe even 2 days, it's a worthless episode, depending on how fast the event's unfolding in current events. So I try to have evergreen content. That way people can keep going back. So you can go into my library of 100 videos now and pull out any one of them, and it's still going to be good today. It's going to be good 3 weeks from now. It's going to be good 3 years from now. So I prefer that evergreen content because that's also going to help people who are trying to, get hours and minutes, because typically when you're looking at things like YouTube, you're looking at things like total minutes watched. So if you have more stuff that people can go back and listen to, then there you go. Because if you get a new viewer and you're doing current event stuff, they're starting at zero. They're not going to go back and listen to something about a current event topic from 2 years ago. That's old news. Why would they want to relive that? So evergreen content, you can jump into that. I'm also hoping that being educational, that other people can use this material, like say homeschoolers or things like that, or any other college students, or just people who are adult learners who want to further their understanding of communication and technology and culture. They can go back and look in my library and pick anything and pick up any place. And it's just like picking a class at a college. You just grab it and go. That's my hope. But that's my personal choice. If you love talking about current events, there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely. There's some of the most interesting ones I listen to are that. And there's also there's also great ways to pick up quick, subscribers and things like that. Because if you're talking about lightning rod issues that are happening in culture, that gets attention. And a video that can go viral, it can be much more likely to fall into that area if you're talking about things that are current. So, next thing you know, you have a video that shoots up out of nowhere, because you talked about something that's in the zeitgeist and people want to talk about that, and boom, it explodes. When you're doing evergreen content, it's more that long, steady progression as people, hop on board. So, like, for example, for 100 videos in, 100 episodes in, I'm sitting at 59 subscribers, which to me is a win. I'm very happy with that. That's kind of really cool. It'll be kind of fun when I look back at this in a year from now and see where I am. It's like, oh, wow, remember when you thought 59 was cool? I hope I'm still doing it, and I'm hoping to be on 59, but that's a good starting point. Why not 59? That's cool. And I'm over 2,500 total views. Now, some of the people I listen to, they've got like 2 million subscribers, and they get 10,000, 20,000 views as they're streaming live. And then, they end up with 1 million plus views by the time it gets published and everything. It's just, it's mind-boggling. To me, it's just the thought that you could have that many. One person I listened to, his channel just passed 1 billion total views. That's amazing to me, to think that 1 billion people are tuning into someone's content. So I'm humbly sitting at my 2,500, and I'm very happy with it. I'm very happy with it because I consider it a blessing that I'm even that far, that 2,500 people dared to tune in. So that's the thing. Then the big hurdle after that is, well, just getting started, and, well, you need equipment to do so. So, well, what do I do? How do I do with equipment? Well, a lot of people just to grab their phone and just have that thing set up and maybe put it in a little tripod or lean it against a book, and have it pointing at you and just talk. You can do that. I'm using a repurposed DSLR camera, and it's an old thing. It's I don't know, 12, 15 years old at this point. But I've, I downloaded a firmware patch into it so it would stay on, because DSLR cameras usually time out after so many minutes. This one, I had to download a patch to turn it basically into a high definition webcam. And I got this camera dirt cheap. I got the tripod dirt cheap. And the light kit got off of Amazon dirt cheap when it was on sale. And they're adjustable LED lights, so you can adjust the color, temperature, and the brightness. So if you want to have a little bit more warm lighting, I know when I first started, my lighting was a little bit more pale, and my mother said, "You look pale." So I turned the temperature down, and now it's more warm. And but that's one of those things that you can change and adjust with that kind of lighting. So I've got 2 on me and 2 on my bookcase in the back, which then, the next thing I think about then is what's behind you, and that's a kind of important thing too. So I mean, this is my typical home office. This is what my home office looks like normally. So this isn't a special set that I've created. And I remember it was funny during COVID, people would actually buy bookcases. There are companies that sold bookcases and with books to people, creators and stuff, so they could have an impressive looking thing behind them during those COVID era days when everyone was always streaming everything. Now, these are mine. These are legitimately mine. I bought them. Most of them for my doctoral work, some from my master's, and some are really, like ones over here, just some really cool theology books that I bought on my own or were gifted to me by friends. So these are all mine, and these are books that I've read. And I just thought that would make it, I'm a professor, so this looks like a professor background, so why not? You could have just a tarp back there. It doesn't really matter. Some people do that. They'll hang a tarp, they'll string some lights, and they'll say, there, it looks cool. Or they might have a bookshelf with some of their knickknacks or whatever on it. And that's totally cool. Whatever you want to do. It doesn't have to be fancy. It could be a literal blank wall. It doesn't have to be anything special. I just chose this because I'm doing the professor thing. This is my home office, so why not? It looks like a professor type setting. It kind of matches the message. There you go. But you don't have to do it. Whatever you want to do for a background, it's fine. Just make sure you pay attention to what's behind you. Because if you've got like dirty laundry piled up back there or something, that looks very poor. So obviously fix that. And then the last thing I want to pay attention to is this guy right here, the microphone. Now, this isn't a $high microphone. I'll replace it one day. I just wanted to, see how it goes from there. But this is a good basic microphone that works and works fairly well. It doesn't have the deep bass response that I would like, but it works really well for what it goes. But the key thing why this is most important, because if the video is lousy but the sound is good, you're way better off than if the video is good and the sound is lousy. Because the truth is, with a lot of things like podcasts, people just listen in. Which is why I don't do stuff with flashy graphics and stuff like that, because I'm fully aware that people typically don't watch, they listen. So they'll put the podcast on and they'll do whatever they're doing while the podcast is playing in the background. That's what most people do. So the key thing is, above all things, is to have a good mic that picks up your audio. And I've got this microphone running into a small little 4-channel mixer. Again, got dirt cheap off of Amazon. And then I'm running everything through a dirt cheap audio video switcher, that I have running through. And again, that's not necessarily something I want to have, and then it records it to an SD card, and then from there into a computer, and then do whatever editing I have to do with Adobe Premiere Pro. But that's just because I have it because I'm a professor. But there are other ones out there like DaVinci Resolve you can get for free. It does basically the same kind of stuff to edit and do whatever you want to do, and then put it on YouTube. There you go. But this thing's critical. There are lots of YouTubers out there and other creators. If they've got a poor microphone, it sounds terrible. And and also I've in-ear monitors. Some have, of course, big earmuffs on. I don't like those, so I've got these little in-ear monitors. You should always be monitoring what you're doing, because you wouldn't know that your video sounds like garbage. And once you have garbage audio, you can't fix it. It's not Hollywood where they just enhance and press the button and all of a sudden it enhances everything. It just doesn't work that way. Garbage audio will be garbage audio. You can clean it up a little bit, but it's going to be garbage audio. Having good audio and being aware that it's good audio the whole time is what you want to do and pay attention to. So invest in a mic. So if you're going to drop any chunk of change, do it on the microphone, because the microphone is king in this space. Which is kind of weird, because we're such video creatures. We're moving back to almost like a radio day, especially like 1920s, 1930s, sitting around the house and listening to Little Orphan Annie radio. That's kind of like we do with podcasts. We just put them on and we listen to them like it's old school from 100 years ago, radio drama. But the radio is king. It'll kill your podcast if you got a lousy microphone. So if you're going to spend anything, spend a little bit extra on the microphone. And what do I mean by extra? This is I think a $60 or $70 microphone setup that came with all the cables and stands and all that stuff to mount it for video production, but I have it for this. You might spend $150 on a good mic. You might really good podcasting mic will set you back $450, $500. I didn't obviously go that far. But that's what you can spend. So whenever I'm watching and I see and hear some good podcasting going on, I'm looking like I wonder what kind of microphone they're using, and I look and I'm like, yep, that's one of them. So you'll see that in this space. But that's a key thing. But at the end of the day, it's just a matter of just getting started. I mean, I'm not, like I said, I pat myself on the back, I made it to 100. But, I hope to make it to 200, 300, 5,000, whatever, however far it goes. But the thing is, you have to start at some point. I had to suck it up and get started because I just didn't want to fail. But you're going to make mistakes. I have. I've cleared my throat a few times in this episode. I'm not going to clear that out. I mean, if I was really picky, I'd go back and digitally erase that. But I'm human. So you see me warts and all, mistakes and all. And I've only ever edited, I think, 2 videos out of 100. So that's it. I just come out and talk about what I want to discuss for that day. And from there, you don't need any other kind of special things. You don't need to have like uniforms or anything like that with the custom logos on it and things like that. I just don't, I'm not there. Maybe I will someday, but that's just not my thing. Ultimately, just get started. If you have a passion about something and you want to talk about something, get out there and talk about it. What's it going to hurt? It's not going to hurt anything. Just get out there and try it. And if you fail, no big deal. No big deal. It's just you doing your thing and enjoying it. I made it to 100 episodes. I'm in the top 5% of podcasters now. Yay. But at the end of the day, I'm just doing it because I like doing it. This is fun for me. It's not making any money. I'm not monetized. I'm just doing it because it's fun. So that's me. That's what I want to do. And that's what I'm doing as a little side gig. And if it eventually gets monetized, cool. But if not, that's okay. I'm still having fun. So I hope you can jump into the space, offer what you have to offer. It could be about anything. Have a voice, explore it, enjoy it. So that's what I have for you today. Thank you very much for tuning in. As always, please like, share, and subscribe, and even comment. Leave me a comment and tell me what you're thinking about doing when you hop into this space. And if you have any questions, feel free to also ask in the comment section. If you didn't like what you heard today, thank you very much for tuning in this long anyway. But I'll see you next time on Communicology.